Welcome to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos, where industry leaders share their thoughts and experience on the future of space business, policy, and opportunity. If you like Constellations, please support us by giving a rating and review on iTunes. And don't forget to share this podcast online to help our community grow.
Welcome to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos. My name is John Gilroy, and I'll be your moderator. Our guest today is Tim McBride, co-founder and COO of Zoic Studios. You know, today, data is coming down at a rate of speed like we've never seen before. It's coming from sensors and satellites and airplanes and untraditional places like social media. You have all these pieces of data coming from space and sensors, mountains of data, and you must find the pieces that are relevant. Our guest today is Tim McBride. Tim is president of Zoic Labs. I will talk to him about this data and the different ways it can be combined so it can be understood and acted upon. So, Tim, give us a little background. So what exactly does Zoic Labs do, and how does it relate to space?
Yeah, you mentioned the two different hats that I wear. I'm one of the co-founders and the COO of Zoic Studios, and that's an entertainment-based, Hollywood-based computer visual effects company. And we work with all the major studios, Netflix and Disney and Amazon and Hulu and Peacock and all those great organizations, helping them make great TV shows and film. But we have a separate division, separate company called Zoic Labs, of which I'm the president. And Zoic Labs provides advanced visualization for big data, satellite data, those kinds of things, as well as software engineering, on and on, UI, UX, augmented reality, virtual reality, et cetera. So on the Zoic Labs side, when you say, how does that connect to space? We're working with a lot of space organizations, both directly with the government and or through contractors. So, for example, we've worked with the NRO and Air Force Research Labs, the Air Force, the Space Force, et cetera, and or some of their contractors like Northrop Grumman or Slingshot or Ball Aerospace, et cetera. So we're just having a blast, on the one hand working in Hollywood and on the other hand working with the Space Force and some of these government contractors, just having a blast, doing both sides of the spectrum.
I'm thinking, Tim, of interviewing you as a 10-year-old boy and say, well, Tim, what do you want to be when you grow up? Oh, I want to hang around with the Space Force and movie stars. Well, you got the dream job, don't you?
Right. Pretty unbelievable. You're spot on, John. We're having an awful lot of fun. Thank you.
So you look at all these pieces of data, airplanes that generate all this data and satellites, and you're trying to find the needle in the haystack. So what does it take to organize that data and find out what is significant?
Well, one of the things that we're really good at is understanding exactly what the operators and the analysts need to do with the data, and then creating interactive and reconfigurable on-the-fly tools that allows them to analyze and understand and visualize the data. So we put together, these maybe visualization experiences where it's not a static 2D dashboard that's, boring to look at, but instead it can be 3D, it can be 4D, it can be an augmented reality or virtual reality, et cetera, et cetera. We put together simple, easy to use interfaces. We make the experience a really good experience. And so by making it beautiful and visually stunning and interesting and reconfigurable on the fly, we allow the operators to find those needles in the haystack. We allow them to find things they may not find on their own, and we make it much more interesting in the process.
I'm sure in the movie industry, there's specific terms that have emotional impact, and there's words in the space and satellite community too. And one of these words is the word exquisite. So I'm going to ask you a question with the fancy word exquisite in it. So how does Zoic Labs accentuate that with exquisite data visualization?
Well, I would say that we bring Hollywood to the eventual result, right? And so we've worked on projects that have been significant over the years. We've helped create some of those virtual or futuristic, visual interfaces and those kind of things that were very futuristic at the time. Today, they're becoming more and more common, but we're able to give visualization experiences to the analysts and operators that are, using your term, exquisite. We would say visually stunning. We'd say creative. We'd say beautiful. Maybe that Hollywood flair that makes it that much more interesting for analysts and operators to work in those environments.
You talked about 2D and 3D just a few seconds ago. I know your background is in making 3D virtual technology for the entertainment industry. So where'd you come up with the idea for visualizing data at all?
Well, to be honest with you, we didn't come up with it. The U.S. government came and found us. We were asked to work on a project many years ago for the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency The name of the project at the time was Map of the World. And they wanted us to bring some of our Hollywood experience, our creativity, our futuristic interfaces, those kinds of things to that project. And it was such a success. The NGA asked us to work on another project called BADAC, or Broadening and Deepening Awareness and Capabilities Project. And again, that was a success. And I think what happened was our reputation began to precede us. And somewhere along the way, we found the space community. And we've worked on a lot of projects, as I mentioned before, with the NRO and Air Force and Space Force and AFRL, et cetera, et cetera. And I think they liked that we had a lot of experience, whether, making spaceships. We made spaceships for shows like Battlestar Galactica, the Serenity spaceship and Firefly. We worked on a more recent show called The 100, right? And so we work on, space shows, for example, et cetera, et cetera. I think we have a lot of experience in that area, and that we brought some really creative ways to do it. And even a way to just take it sideways for a minute, if you think about the youth of today, the millennials and the college graduates, they tend to go to maybe Silicon Valley or they go to Wall Street, but the idea is to bring them into Washington, D.C. and to work for government projects as well. And so, the government needs its interfaces to be interesting. They need the visualization, their data to be interesting. And I think that's part of what we bring to the affair, is not only finding those needles in the haystack, but making it a much more interesting experience in the process.
I think your career is similar to a guy named Dr. Pat Hanrahan. I don't know if you know him up at Tableau, but he takes and visualizes data in a different capacity. But yours is so much, I think the kids would say it's funner, Battleship Galactica. Wow, this seems like a whole lot of fun, doesn't it?
You're spot on. Yeah, thank you very much, John.
So anyone can look at numbers and charts and graphs and try to come up with something, but making them easy to understand by many, that's the challenge. I mean, you can get a data scientist and sit around the room and they understand the numbers, but Joe Sixpack out there, or maybe a CEO, may not understand it. So that, I think that's the challenge, isn't it?
I think you're absolutely right. There's the amount of data that gets pushed through the pipes these days, like, for example, feeding down from satellites, it's massive. It's unbelievable. It's unbearable. So what needs to happen is that these analysts and operators that are looking for really important stuff need to have the right tools at their fingertips, where they can, let's say, visualize data in such a way where they can find that needle in haystack, using your term, or where they've got, some extra tools. We tend to create tools for the end use customer that they may not have, that allows them to manipulate on the fly what they're looking at, turn it upside down and sideways and whatever that takes for them to find that story. That's part of what we are, storytellers, right? And we try to bring the analyst the opportunity to find the story within the data.
Yeah, that's an unusual skill. One is a quantitative skill. One is a qualitative skill. We have to be articulate, no vocabulary. But the other one is you have to understand the numbers. And so it gets kind of difficult. So what do you mean by intuitive storytelling? Just find someone with an 800 score in verbal who's also an engineer, get those both skill sets together?
I think, without being facetious, the answer is yes to your question, right? We're really good at understanding through lots of interviews, understanding what the customer needs to know and wants to know. And in some cases, understanding what their end goal is. And even if they're not able to put it in words, we really dive deep and try to understand exactly what the customer needs and wants. And then from that, we know what kind of data they've got, and we use our intuitive skills to get from where they are to where they want to go. An example, maybe even outside of space, might be that we worked on a project for COVID-19 with a scientific organization at a University of California, San Francisco, called Zoic Labs. And they had a massive amount of data and researchers all over the world that they were trying to collaborate, and yet they didn't have the right tools to do so. So pro bono, just trying to help out this world pandemic, we built some tools for them to be able to collaborate and share the data and visualize the data. And it was very helpful in terms of scientists in Paris and New York and Germany and San Francisco, et cetera, collaborating. And similarly, we've worked on a project recently called Spectra. I know this is a Kratos / Constellations podcast. There's a lot of Kratos data that was coming into CSPOC, and we worked with CSPOC to help provide some tools to help them manage their electromagnetic interference reports, right? And so, yeah, there's a lot of data out there, but everybody needs a little bit of help to be able to pull that in and manipulate it in such a way that they can understand it, visualize it, using, back to your word, but using our intuitive storytelling. We are storytellers to help get the results of what they're trying to get at.
So last night after dinner, I sat in the living room with my wife, and I went to Amazon Prime. I fired up Minority Report. She said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing my homework for this interview tomorrow." And I'll let the cat out of the bag, you know. There are scenes that you have developed in film that are very far-reaching, and certain scenes in Minority Report that you're now actually building as functional data visualization tools. I mean, did someone come up to you, knock on your door, and go, "Hey, Tim, I want something just like that movie"? I mean, how do you go from like these cool movie scenes with Tom Cruise to visualization tools for these hardened DoD folks?
You know, I think that's part of the skill set that Zoic Labs brings to the table. You know, our sister company, Zoic Studios, has been working on futuristic projects for its entirety. All 19 years in existence, we've been working on futuristic projects. So we're able to tap into that, right? At the end of the day, you've got data coming in and it needs to be displayed or visualized. And we're able to put some really visually stunning results to the data, futuristic looks, you know, et cetera. So absolutely, we do have customers that have seen Minority Report or Iron Man and say, "Hey, can you give us some of those heads-up displays or futuristic looks?" And the answer is yes. It's what we've been doing for our entire careers is putting out, the result of our creativity on the big screen, and now we're giving it to analysts and operators to do those analytics on the small screen.
You know, Tim, thousands of people from all over the world have listened to this podcast. Go to Google and type in Constellations Podcast to get to our show notes page. Here, you can get transcripts for all 100-plus interviews. Also, you can sign up for free email notifications for future episodes. Let's go from Minority Report to Avengers. You know, Zoic Studios created the visual effects for Avengers Age of Ultron, and Zoic Labs is its sister company. I read that Zoic Labs will draw upon inspiration for the Avengers movies to convert satellite sensor data to video. I mean, how is that accurate, and how are you doing that now?
The answer is yes, it's accurate. You know, again, on some level, we've talked about that already, but we did work on Avengers Age of Ultron as one of many exciting superhero projects that we've worked on. And, you know, I could mention some for you a little bit later, but, the answer is yes, that's visually stunning. That's visually exciting to all of us, you know, whether we're watching it at home or the big screen at the theater. And why not give the analysts and the operators some of those kind of visuals that, frankly, maybe helps them find those needle in the haystack, because they're visually alert and aware, looking at something that's more interesting and stunning, right? So we try to bring those great visuals to our work, and so that's an important part of our expertise. It's not our only expertise, is that we can do this, you know, these Hollywood stunning looks, but that's part of what we bring to the table.
You know, Zoic Labs, parent company is Zoic Studios. I think their mainstay is creative visual effects for television and feature films. You know, you created technology that allowed 3D scenes to be reiterated quickly. I guess you can turn around lots of visual effect shots in a real short period of time. In fact, it's been said that you've created a model that looks at data as fast as the speed of thought. Can you talk about this technology, and how do you turn it around and use it for the DoD?
Well, maybe I'll take you back, you know, a few years. Part of what Zoic Studios did before we had Zoic Labs is that, you know, we were pushing massive amounts of data through our own pipeline, through our own studio, right? And so we had a bunch of software programmers and scripters and coders that were doing analytics on our own data, trying to find ways to move it through our pipeline quicker. So, you know, we built visualization tools internally for ourselves, right? And that's why jumping into space, for example, was not difficult for us. You know, process improvement is a key part of our infrastructure. It's a key part of our DNA. It's a key part of our capabilities. So when we then pivoted and got into space, for example, data is data, and our tools can use the data of any type. We've built some proprietary software called Cognitive Code, for example, that allows that data to get ingested and visualized, as you put it, at the speed of light. Of course, it takes some amazing hardware, you know, to be able to store and move that stuff through. But yes, we've built some great technology that allows that visualization to get visualized immediately. And that's what's amazing for the analyst and the operator, is they're looking for things that are immediate. They need results. They don't want to mess around. They don't want all this time it takes to ingest data, or all the time it takes to output the data, and they have to bring in software engineers to help them format it and all that kind of stuff. That we've built some great tools that allows that to happen much quicker and much faster, so they can get at their results quicker, right? So that's an important part of it.
And you've been in the business long enough to know that years ago, what they used to do is they'd take hard drives and FedEx them over to organizations that would render it all night long and go back and forth and back and forth. I mean, that's why this was the speed was a big hurdle that you had to overcome. And obviously, you come up with some proprietary solutions to do that.
Right.
Now, you're based in Los Angeles, all kinds of excitement out there. 10 million people in the county, we all know that. And out there, I guess everyone wants to work in the movies, in front of a camera or behind a camera. It's probably not difficult to find someone in that general area. However, once you get in the field of data, especially data scientists, I don't think the job market is as packed with talent. So how hard is it to find candidates for this work? Do you even look at data scientists, or does everyone you work for come out of television and film?
I would say on the data scientist side, John, that we don't employ data scientists. We sometimes contract with them and or we partner with other companies that have data scientists, but we do everything else. We're engineers, we're artists, we're designers, we're software programmers, we're game developers. We bring all those other tools. Full stack software developers are part of the team that are helping write the code and create some of the solutions that our clients are looking for. So yes, data scientists, per your question, we're not engaged with, but I'll tell you what, there's a lot of software engineers and technical artists that are in very high demand these days. And so we're working very hard to build a great culture where we attract those kind of great employees and where they want to stay. And we're proud of that culture. It is an important part of business these days.
Okay, put on your thinking hat here and look at the last 20 years of your career. Tell us what the most interesting movie project that you've worked on for Hollywood been.
Well, that's a very interesting question because, quite frankly, we've worked on about 1,000 projects over the last 20 years. And so there's just so many. We're doing a space podcast here. Maybe one of the, popular projects that was a lot of fun was working on Space Force with Steve Carell, which was a fun show and a comic show, also very popular in the Space Force and the Air Force. And, maybe there's kind of an interesting story or two. The real general, General Raymond, was stated publicly that he wished they would have put Bruce Willis in that role rather than Steve Carell, right? Which is kind of funny. We were in a different meeting with the Space Force where somebody, right in the middle of the meeting, somebody stopped and said, wait a second, so let me understand this right. You're working with us, the U.S. Space Force, and you're making the Space Force TV show right now at the same time, right? So it's been a fun project to work on, and if I can throw out a shout out to Steve Carell, Zoic Labs was involved recently in the General Moorman Memorial, trying to help put on a great product, right, for that live memorial on Zoom. And Zoic and I reached out to Steve Carell directly through an intermediary in between third party and asked if he'd want to contribute as part of the Zoom recordings that were done in advance as Zoic helped clip together the final result. And Steve Carell was very gracious to do so, and he put out a brief, respectful, and of course humorous clip, in honor of General Moorman and for the memorial. So, all by itself, that Space Force project, it was a fun project, and man, has it been fun for us to both work for the U.S. Space Force in reality as well as on TV at the same time. So that's just one of 1,000 great shows we worked on.
That's great. Tim, when we launched this podcast 3 years ago, I never thought we'd have the opportunity to interview a company that applies visual effects from TV and film to satellites in space. I mean, this is a great mix you got going here.
As you put it up front, John, how lucky are we that we're working in Hollywood, for some of the biggest and best studios in the world. I mentioned we work for these TV and film studios. We also work for the great ad agencies. We work for the big video game companies. So, it's just a dream come true on one hand to be working with those guys. But we never thought, 19 years ago when we started the business, we'd be working for the U.S. Space Force and the Air Force and, the NRO and the NGA and the DOD, just so many great organizations. We couldn't be happier and more thrilled that we can add value to our government and help make the world maybe a little bit better place.
Oh, great. You sure are. I'd like to thank our guest, Tim McBride, co-founder and COO of Zoic Studios.
Thanks for listening to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos. If you like this interview, please subscribe, tell a friend, and give us a review.